නැවුම් සුවඳින් පිරේ නව රින් වෙළඳපොලේ අඩුම මිලකට.
සුවඳවත් තේරීමක්. ස්මාර්ට් ඉදිරියක්.
Tonight, no shortage. More fuel shipments Sri Lanka bound. Sufficient stocks available over next 10 days, says Energy Minister. Organized obstructions. Sri Lanka suspends fuel supply to filling stations where distribution is obstructed. Police to crack down on those hoarding fuel. No more panic. Litro assures daily distribution of 80,000 LP gas cylinders. A coordinated approach. World Bank, ADB and AIIB announced support to economic crisis response in Sri Lanka. Priority to medicine, gas and fertilizer. All this and much more coming up on this Saturday, the 21st of May, 2022.
Nelly, මතකෙන් ගිලිහුණු black shine එකස් කලඹක රහස sunset black shine සමගින්.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
And a warm welcome. Joining you tonight on First at 9, I'm Indivari Amuwatta. While assuring of sufficient fuel stocks over a period of the next 10 days, Minister of Power and Energy Kanchana Wijesekara announced today that fuel will not be supplied to filling stations where the distribution process is obstructed by protesters. Taking to Twitter last night, Wijesekara said organized groups were preventing fuel trucks from passing certain areas, demanding they be unloaded at different fuel stations and threatening to set fire. Convening media this afternoon, the minister claimed that some owners of fuel stations and members of political parties are responsible for the disruption caused. The energy minister, meanwhile, urged the public not to obstruct vehicles in essential service such as ambulances.
The government's immediate plan is to put an end to the long queues at fuel stations across the country. In a bid to do so, Minister of Power and Energy Kanchana Wijesekara urged the public not to queue up at refilling stations during the weekend until fuel is distributed to filling stations. Speaking at a media briefing this afternoon, the minister said sufficient stocks of petrol and diesel are available in the country for distribution as unloading of more fuel shipments began during the day and more are expected to arrive in the future.
කිසිම බියක් තියාගත යුතු නැහැ පෙට්‍රල් හෝ ඩීසල් සම්බන්ධයෙන් ඒ වගේම ඉදිරි දින 10 ඇතුළත තුල තව ඩීසල් නෞකා දෙකක් සහ තව පෙට්‍රල් නෞකාවක් මේ පෙට්‍රල් නෞකාවේ අපේ තිබුණු ලොකුම ගැටලුව බොහෝ දිනෙකට පෙට්‍රල් 95යිද කියලා දැන් ගොඩබාමින් තියෙන නෞකාවෙත් පෙට්‍රල් 95 තියෙනවා හෙට අපි බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන ගොඩබාන්න තියෙන නෞකාවෙත් පෙට්‍රල් 95 තියෙනවා ඊළඟට අපි 25 වෙනිදාට එන නෞකාවෙත් පෙට්‍රල් 95 92 දෙකම තියෙනවා ඒ නිසා කිසිම රින්ගයක් ඇති වෙන්න ක්‍රමයක් නැහැ ඩීසල් සහ ඔටෝ ඩීසල් සුපර් ඩීසල් සහ පෙට්‍රල් 92 95 කියන වර්ග හතරම ඉදිරි දින කීපේ අපිට අකණ්ඩව වෙළඳපොළට නිකුත් කරන්න පුළුවන්.
Despite the government's request to not queue outside fuel stations, people were seen outside refilling stations. Several demonstrations by the people blocking main roads were reported today as well at several areas such as Vaskadua and Bopitiya. At the IOC fuel station in Valigama, this morning, a group of people had not allowed the filling station to unload its diesel stock as they demanded a petrol stock before its unloading. After police took the diesel bowser into their custody, the protesters then conducted a protest blocking the Valigama-Matra main road. In a backdrop where incidents of this nature continue to be reported near filling stations, the Energy Minister took a policy decision to suspend the supply of fuel to filling stations located in areas where the distribution process is obstructed by protesters.
එස අපි ප්‍රතිපත්ති මේ තීන්දුවක් කරන් තියෙනවා කොහේ හරි තැනක ඉන්ධන පෙරෝම් හලක් වහලා එමන් නැත්නම් ඉන්ධන පෙරෝම් හලක් ඉදිරියේ ප්‍රවාහනයට අවශ්‍ය කටයුතු අකර්මණ්‍ය කරනවා නම් හිතාමතා ඒක කරනවා නම් අපි ඒ ඉන්ධන පෙරෝම් හලට මින් ඉදිරියට අපි ඉන්ධන බෙදා හැරීමේ කටයුතු සිදු කරන්නේ නැහැ කියන එක. මේක සමහරවිට සංවිධානාත්මකව කරනවා ඉන්ධන පෙරෝම් වල අයිතිකාරොත් සමහරවිට හිතාමතා කරනවා පිරිස් යොදවලා සමහර දේශපාලන පක්ෂ කරනවා. දැන් වැලිගම සිදුවෙච්ච සිදුවීම අද උදෑසන මම මේක කියන්නේ වගකීමෙන් කියන්නේ පොලිසිය නිලධාරීන් මට එතනින්ද කතා කරා. එතන ඉන්ධන පිරවුම්හලේ අයිතිකරු මට කතා කරා. ජනතා විමුක්ති පෙරමුණේ වැලිගම නගර සභාව නියෝජනය කරන මන්ත්‍රීවරයෙක් ඇතුළු කණ්ඩායමක් ඇවිල්ලා එම ඉන්ධන පිරවුම්හලට ලැබිලා තිබුණු ඩීසල් තොගය බාන්න ඉඩ දීලා තිබුණේ නැහැ. පෙට්‍රල් තොගයකුත් තාවොත් විතරයි ඩීසල් ටික බාන්න දෙන්න කියලා උන් බලපෑම් කළා තියෙනවා.
The minister also urged the public to refrain from stockpiling fuel that leads to the unusual increase in demand. The minister also announced some measures today to prevent the people from stockpiling on fuel.
මේ මොහොතේ අපි ඉතාමත්ම කාරුණික ඉල්ලනවා. බූලි වලට කෑන් වලට කිසිසේත් අපිට ලබා දිය නොහැකි. ඉන්ධන ලබා දිය නොහැකි. මොකද අපි රත වාහන වලට තමයි මුලින්ම ඒ ප්‍රමුඛතාවය ලබා දීලා තියෙන්නේ. මට තේරෙනවා සමහර තැන්වල බූලි වලට කෑන් වලට ගෙනියනවා ඇති සමහරලාට විදුලි ජනක යන්ත්‍ර ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන්න. තමන්ගේ තියෙන ව්‍යාපාරික ස්ථානේ වෙන්න පුළුවන්. තමන්ගේ තියෙන නිවසේ වෙන්න පුළුවන්. සමහරව අපිට කියනවා කතා කරලා නෑ අපි මේ ගෙනියන්නේ වාහනේ නැවතිලා තියෙනවා වාහනේට අවශ්‍ය තෙල් ටික දාගන්න කියලා. නමුත් අපි මේ ඉල්ලීමක් කරනවා දින 3ක් යනකම් අපිට දෙන්න මේ පොලිම ඉවත් කරගන්න. ඊට පස්සේ අපි වැඩ පිළිලක් හදලා දෙන්නම්. ඔබට ගෙදර නැවතිලා තියෙන වාහනයක් තියෙනවා නම් අතරමඟ නවතිලා තියෙන වාහනයක් තියෙනවා නම් ඒකට එකතු කරගැනීමේ ක්‍රමවේදයක් අපි හදලා දෙන්නම්.
Recently, Commissioner General of Essential Services KDS Ruwan Chandra requested priority at refueling stations to vehicles involved in essential services. But the ministry has received reports of ambulances being inconvenienced by the public at fuel queues.
ගිලන් රථයක් එනවා නම් ඒක පොලිමේ පිටිපස්සේ තියන්න එපා. දැන් සුවසරියෙන් කතා කරලා කියනවා උන්ට දුවන්න විදියක් නැහැ සමහර තැන්වල උන්ට එන්න දෙන්නේ නැහැ කියලා. මේක කරන්න එපා. මේ සේවයක් සපයන ආයතන සමහරලාට මිය යන ලෙඩෙක් වෙන්න පුළුවන්. ඒ නිසා පොලිමේ කොහෙ තිබුණත් අපි ඉල්ලීමක් කළා තියෙන්නේ විශේෂයෙන්ම මේ ගිලන් රථ සඳහා ප්‍රමුඛතාවය ලබා දීලා කටයුතු කරන්න.
The $200 million provided under the Indian credit line for fuel purchase is expected to be over this month. This raises a serious question as to how Sri Lanka will be able to procure fuel over the next few months of the year.
අපි ඉන්දියාවත් එක්ක තව ඉල්ලලා තියෙනවා අපි ණය ක්‍රමයක් දෙන්න කියලා. චීනෙන් අපි දැන් ඉල්ලීමක් කළා තියෙනවා තව අපිට ණය ක්‍රමයක් අපිට ලබා දෙන්න කියලා පෙට්‍රෝලියම් ප්‍රොඩක්ට්ස් දෙන්න පුළුවන් නම් ඒක අපි ERD එක හරහා අපි ඉල්ලීමක් කළා තියෙනවා.
Amidst heavy protests across the island for domestic gas, Litro Gas Lanka Limited reiterated that they will release 80,000 cylinders of LP gas to the market daily. Its chairman Vijitha Herat said that more LP gas shipments are expected to arrive next week, with plans already afoot to fulfill a $7 million payment for LPG shipments on Monday.
Just like for fuel, queues near Litro gas outlets across the country for domestic gas purchases continue to grow. As an extension of the public agitation, protests were held both yesterday and today, demanding LP gas, with one such demonstration held in Borella, obstructing traffic on the Kota road. Then, people in Hikkaduwa also protested demanding LP gas, blocking the Colombo Galle main road. Litro Gas meanwhile unloaded another consignment yesterday, which is said to have LPG stock sufficient for 6 days. The state gas supplier also said that steps have been taken to release 80,000 cylinders to the market. Speaking to AdaDerana, Chairman of Litro Gas Lanka Limited Vijitha Herat said that 50,000 cylinders will be released to areas in Colombo and Gampaha as per recommendations of the Committee on Public Enterprises. He also said that plans are underway to make a $7 million payment in lieu of LPG shipments on Monday. 2 shipments have already left Oman for Colombo. The chairman of Litro Gas also said that a mobile application will be introduced to people by Monday, providing details on LPG availability.
Now, police fired tear gas on protesting Higher National Diploma Students Federation as they attempted to force their way through barricades set up along the World Trade Center. With tensions seemingly escalating, the army was also deployed to the area in order to control the situation.
The Higher National Diploma Students Federation staged a protest near the town hall in Colombo this afternoon under the theme "No Gota Ranil Government, Allow a New Mandate." The protesters then marched towards the Colombo fort. The police also read out a court order that had been obtained, preventing the protesters from entering some roads, state institutions and some other institutions too. However, as the protests continued to march on, the police set up barricades to prevent the protesters from proceeding down the World Trade Center road. Nevertheless, the protesters, adamant on continuing their march, attempted to break down the barricades. This attempt was countered by the police with tear gas and water cannons. However, the police had to fire water cannons on multiple occasions in order to control the protesters. During the tensions, one police officer who had suffered injuries was taken to a nearby hospital. In the meantime, the army was also deployed to the area after the protesters continued to break down the barricades.
The Gulf's Green protest marked its 43rd day since the struggle began, establishing an office for the struggle at the site. Calling a media briefing, the protesters rejected a list of proposals that had been submitted by a group known as the All-Party Committee. Gulf's protesters state that while they were not aware of such a list of proposals and hadn't supported such proposals, they intend submitting a set of new proposals that will represent the ideals of the Gulf struggle and the people of Sri Lanka.
For over 40 days, the Gulf's Green has seen hundreds of people daily making their way to the site of the ongoing protest, echoing the same demand since its inception for the president to step down and the government resign. Last night too was no different. The protesters inaugurated what they call the Office of Struggle and convened a media briefing last night. During the media briefing, they claimed of attempts by various groups with political affiliations to disrupt the struggle. They stated that a group of Gota Gogama protesters identifying them as the All-Party Committee had met with one of the national political parties and claimed to have presented a host of proposals on behalf of the struggle. According to the protesters addressing the media briefing, the proposals were not agreed upon by any party of the Gota Gogama protest. While rejecting the proposals that were presented by the All-Party Committee, they said that they are in the process of forming a list of proposals that represent the cause of the Gulf's protest site as well as the people of the country, and that they will take measures to make the list of proposals public in the near future. Meanwhile, the protest outside the temple trees was carried out today as well. As part of a series of CSR projects that the temple trees protesters are carrying out on a daily basis, they today cleaned the stretch of beach from Vellavatta to Kolpeti.
More support to Sri Lanka. Details after this break.
Big 3.
The Asian Development Bank, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank and the World Bank say they are adopting a coordinated approach to mitigate the impact of the economic crisis on the people of Sri Lanka. Now, the three institutions said they will support to sustain basic services and livelihoods with access to essential items such as medicine, cash assistance, gas and fertilizer through the relocation of resources from existing projects.
On Thursday, Secretary to the Treasury convened the first joint coordination meeting with the Asian Development Bank, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, and the World Bank under a joint action plan to support Sri Lanka's response to the economic crisis. In a joint statement, they said that all three institutions are adopting a coordinated approach to sustain basic services and livelihoods and to mitigate the impact of the economic crisis on the people of Sri Lanka. This includes access to essential items such as medicines, cash assistance, gas and fertilizer through the reallocation of resources from existing projects. Recently, Sri Lanka was given $160 million from the World Bank as financial assistance to procure essential supplies.
Meanwhile, China reiterated their commitment in supporting Sri Lanka to overcome its debt crisis. Speaking at a media briefing yesterday, China's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbing said that China fully relates to the difficulties and challenges facing Sri Lanka and stands ready to play a constructive role in Sri Lanka's steady economic and social development. Wenbing said that China supports relevant financial institutions in having consultations with Sri Lanka to seek a proper settlement in relation to Sri Lanka's debt to China. He went on to say that China stands ready to work with relevant countries and international financial institutions and to continue to play a positive role in easing Sri Lanka's debt burden and helping achieve sustainable development. Further, he hoped and believes that Sri Lanka will work in the same direction and make independent efforts to uphold the legitimate rights and interests of foreign investment and financing partners and maintain stability and credibility of its investment and financing environment. Minister of Foreign Affairs Professor G.L. Peiris requested Acting High Commissioner of Canada in Sri Lanka, Amanda Strohan, to ensure that the Canadian government takes measures to rectify the fallacies in the motion that was passed earlier this week, recognizing the 18th of May as Tamil Genocide Remembrance Day. Minister of Foreign Affairs G.L. Peiris registered the government of Sri Lanka's emphatic protest and deep concern over the adoption of a motion in the Canadian Parliament on the 18th of May on the alleged genocide of Tamils in Sri Lanka. In a meeting with the Acting High Commissioner of Canada in Sri Lanka at the Foreign Ministry yesterday, Sri Lanka's Foreign Minister categorically rejected the false content of the motion and highlighted that its erroneous substance is fundamentally inconsistent with and contradicts the position of the Government of Canada that, quote, it has not made a finding that there was genocide in Sri Lanka, unquote. Considering the inaccurate and prejudicial nature of the motion, as well as the negative perceptions of Sri Lanka generated in the public domain of a result of such conduct, the Foreign Minister requested the Canadian government to take appropriate action to correct the fallacies contained in the motion. She also agreed to convey the content of the Department of Foreign Affairs communique and the same to the Canadian government. In other local news, the Criminal Investigations Department today recorded statements from 3 high-ranking police officers regarding the incidents that took place on the 9th of May, where peaceful protests at the Golface Green and in front of temple trees were attacked by pro-government supporters. Among the police officers whose statements were recorded from were IGP C.D. Wickramaratne, the commanding officer of the STF, DIG Varuna Jayasundara and the DIG in charge of the Special Bureau Chaminda Dhanapala. It is reported that Johnston Fernando and several other parliamentarians will be summoned to the CID on Monday to make statements regarding the incident. In the meantime, the Criminal Investigations Department had managed to apprehend the individuals who had attacked a person at the Golface Green on the 9th of May in the area of Hokandara. The CID stated that the person in question was identified as 43-year-old Ashanta Nalaka. The individual was seen arriving on a motorbike on the day of the incident and were seen preventing the trucks with water cannons from making their way to the area in order to disperse pro-government supporters from attacking the peaceful protesters. Welcome back. Taking you to business news, a dramatic late session rally brought the S&P 500 back from the brink of a bear market, but the index still sank for a seventh straight week in a stretch of weakness not seen since 2001. The benchmark closed the day little changed after a sell-off earlier sent it down more than 20% from a January closing high, meeting the common definition of a bear market. At the end of another volatile week, the monthly expiration of options tied to equities and exchange trade funds exacerbated price swings. Treasuries gained with the dollar as caught bids. The S&P 500's seventh weekly decline marked the longest losing streak since the dot-com bubble burst more than 2 decades ago. It's just its fourth streak of 7 or more weekly losses in the post-World War II period, according to an investment group. Oil prices settled slightly higher yesterday as a planned European Union ban on Russian oil and easing of COVID-19 lockdowns in China countered concerns that slowing economic growth will hurt demand. Brent futures for July delivery rose 51 cents to 112 cents a barrel, while the U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude for June rose $1.02 to settle at $113.23 on its last day as the front month. WTI notched its fourth straight week of gains, which it last did in mid-February. Brent gained about 1% this week after finally failing about 1% last week. The more actively traded WTI contract for July was up about 0.4% to $110.28 a barrel. In China, Shanghai did not signal any change to its planned end of a prolonged citywide lockdown on June 1st, even though the city announced its first new COVID-19 cases outside quarantined areas in 5 days. And that wraps up tonight's edition of First at 9. Good evening.